For real this time.
Okay. Is that a blankie? Do you have a blankie under your legs?
I do have a blankie. I always have a blankie under me.
This is just news to me. I didn't know you had a blankie.
It's cold down here, and
why don't I have a blankie?
This means I don't need to wear a sweater or whatever. I just have a blanket on my legs.
I mean, you could wear a sweater.
No one can ever know that.
It's going in the cold open. I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do. We're recording now.
Yeah,
that's it. We haven't said anything else cold open worthy this entire conversation.
True. Totally.
Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast watching, analyzing, and discussing the collective works of Mike Flanagan. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, he's been wandering the hills of Hill House all evening. He's probably doing really well, I think. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
I'm a little white dog or something.
Oh, that's where we're going with it. Okay, sure.
Well, you were trying to make it spooky, but I'm going to make it silly because I gotta keep things light around here, or I'll get too scared.
How come? I was just saying you were just a crazy woman losing her mind, wandering the hills. You decided to make yourself a ghost dog, and I'm the one making it spooky?
A ghost dog is not scary.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize we had like rules about different levels of scary with different levels of phantom creature.
When I think ghost dog, I think like Casper the Friendly Ghost dog, or like Jack Skellington's little dog creature.
Okay. Can we take a step back? I just want to be clear. Casper the Friendly Ghost was not a dog.
No, his dog. He probably had a dog. Look, I don't know that he had a dog, but I'm going to assume that
I don't know if he had a dog.
All right, Casper. The Friendly Ghost's dog. He is a friend with the dog, but it might not be a ghost dog.
Okay.
It's unclear from this summary on paramountcartoons.fandom.com.
paramountcartoons.fandom.com, the one source for dog-related ghost information.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to get to the bottom of this, but I'll look into it later, okay?
I'm glad. This is utmost priority in our worlds.
Yeah, I know.
What kind of dog did Casper the Friendly Ghost have? Do you like? I feel like the fact that he has to say he's a friendly ghost makes me suspicious about the fact that he's not really a friendly ghost. Like, I think, I don't know. It was just like, hey, I'm Casper the Ghost. I'd be like, oh, sweet. But if you're like, no, don't worry, I'm friendly. I'm just like, It's like, I don't know. At work lately, my business has been talking about how healthy the business is. And they've been talking about it a lot. To the point where I'm like, I'm starting to doubt the health of the business. And I feel the same way about Casper the Friendly Ghost. It seems like he's laying the friendly on a little too thick.
I like this reading. I feel like this is a good warm up for the conversation we're about to have, where there's a lot of ambiguity in Casper the Friendly Ghost.
I'm so incredibly impressed by your ability to take it back to the topic at hand instead of continuing this useless tangent at the very beginning of the show. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This week on the show, we are wrapping up our discussion of Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting of Hill House. This is our overview episode where we attempt to look at the book as a whole. And this week, really, our goal is just going to try to get a handle on what the hell's going on with this book. We spent 3 episodes going through the weeds, and now we're climbing to the top of the tower to get maybe a bird's eye view on Hill House. And we're going to try to figure out what it means, or we'll fall.
We'll fall. Yeah.
And die.
We're going to fall.
Yeah. Then we've got a discussion question answer for you guys. We normally do mailbags on the overview episodes, but it's been so quick since we had another overview episode. We just finished our discussion of Gerald's game not too long ago, so it didn't feel right to have another mailbag, so we decided to hold off on that. But so this is This might actually, for the first time, actually be a shorter episode. We always call the overview episode a planned shorter episode. It never really works out that way. Of course, we've now wasted 5 minutes talking about Casper the Friendly Ghost. So if things continue that way, this will be the longest episode yet.
Yep.
All right, Matt. do you want to get into it? Let's talk about The Haunting of Hill House.
Let's do it.
It has been a little over a week since we finished reading this novel, and I want to get first here how you're feeling about it. A week removed. How are you feeling about this book right now?
Yeah. I think now that I have a little bit of distance from it, I can kind of see the arc of the whole thing that we were going for with this book. And, you know, there's a few things. One thing I think I said last week was that I was going to touch base with, like, what is the critical conversation around this work? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the critical conversation is kind of stuff that we said. So
good for us.
Yeah, right. But basically, just to kind of reiterate, like, a lot of it concerns the idea of there's this ambiguity where, you know, you never quite know if what's happening is just our protagonist experiencing a total mental breakdown, or if supernatural things are happening, and that being actually a huge source of confusion, and in fact being, in a sense, scary on its own. Like the scary thing is not, oh no, there's a ghost. The scary thing is I can't actually tell if there's a ghost or if this is just madness. And that's actually kind of disturbing. It kind of puts you in the mind of someone whose mind is dissolving and lets you experience that, which is scary. I also saw that my interpretation that, you know, Eleanor is magic, psychic, telekinetic, whatever, did cause all of the things that happened, but did it unwittingly. That's an interpretation that others have made.
I think that's a fairly popular read of the book. I'm not prepared to call it like the most readily accepted version of the story, but I think it is a fairly popular read amongst most of the people that experience this book.
I always, you know, put a big caveat as, like, the author is not necessarily the final authority on the work, but there was apparently an interaction where some critic was, like, complimenting her on how she managed to write this ghost story that didn't have any supernatural elements, and she was Shirley Jackson was like, oh, but it does have supernatural elements. So if you're taking her at face value, she literally just said supernatural elements. She didn't say ghosts. Right.
Yeah.
Which to me seems like carefully chosen language that sort of supports this idea that we're kind of getting at here. But I don't need to be right about this. I'm just pointing out that, like, I'm not the first person in the world to think of this interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we said in the very first episode is that Shirley Jackson believes in ghosts. Believed in these things, these supernatural, whether telekinesis, mind reading, these kind of things are things that she believed existed in the world. And so, yeah, it is unsurprising that things that could certainly serve as metaphor or symbol also could as readily serve as just actually being what it actually is. That this was a place that was evil and wrong and bad, and a damaged person with some sort of power herself walked into it and was supercharged by the evil and manipulated and controlled and pushed and prodded into eventually taking her own life. I think that is the most straightforward read of the story, I guess you could say. But I mean, ultimately, like, one of the strengths of the novel is that it's one of many interpretations you could possibly have of this thing. And one of the things I did also kind of looked through criticism of this book, both, you know, analysis and also people that had criticism with it. And one of the most common refrains of criticism I saw, I thought was actually hilarious, because it was something we talked about kind of in jest last week about all the other characters. And the criticism I saw repeated multiple times was that a real flaw of the book is you have all these other characters, that they themselves are going through these things, that we take the time to set up these characters, who they are, what their flaws are, maybe what brought them to the house. and then the book kind of leaves all that stuff dangling or in the background. And we joked about it, but that is true. But I think, I guess the difference in the tactic I would take with that kind of critique is to say, but ultimately I think that's the point, is that the book has all these other characters. We have everything kind of set up to do, I guess we'll call it like a traditional ghost story, haunted house story thing, where each one of the characters is bringing their own stuff to the table. And we're going to see the ways in which the hauntings, real or not, expose the weaknesses of all of our people. And that really doesn't fully happen. Or if it does, it's so backgrounded that it's difficult to really grasp definitively what is happening there. Like, what is happening to Theodora over the course of this book? Like I think there's enough there, and I want to talk to you about each of these characters today and see if we can build what their background story was in this book. But it is so overshadowed by Eleanor and what is happening to Eleanor. And Eleanor's, I mean, it feels maybe a little harsh to call it selfishness, but like, she is so absorbed throughout the entire book about herself and what these people think of her. What are they talking about her? Are they thinking about her? Are they judging her? What is it's just really interesting, like, that her self-hatred has kind of outwardly expressed itself as like main character syndrome in a lot of ways, that like, I am the most important person here, everyone's always thinking and talking about me. It's paranoia, it's self-hatred, it's all these things crafted in a book that is so kind of shining the spotlight on Eleanor constantly, that anytime the spotlight like moves to maybe get a little bit of information about Luke or the doctor or Theodora, it's kind of like Eleanor has to like grab it back and turn it back towards her. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah. I think that is really interesting. I'm thinking about the fact that, you know, her life is not something that the story spends a ton of time explicitly dwelling on, although we do get some background, and then it's kind of dribbled throughout the rest of the story as it's sort of bubbling up from her psyche. And, you know, the story says specifically, like, it's not that she was intrinsically socially inept. It's that she was basically isolated and put in this position of having to be the caretaker for her hateful mother for her whole life, basically.
Yeah.
Like 10 years or something. I don't remember exactly. I was thinking about the first time that my local friend group had like a social gathering after the COVID lockdowns, and everyone was still being very responsible. So, and they're like a conscientious group anyway. So most people in that group hadn't interacted with a lot of people, including me. I basically only interacted with my kids for a year or something. And everybody's wearing masks. So you've got all these, and these are all friends, and they're all interacting, but there's this enormous like self-consciousness.
Sure.
And I'm bringing it up here because it's like I felt like Eleanor in that moment where it's very, very hard to break through this like layer of like ice that has accumulated around you, and you don't even, before you get in that situation, you don't even realize how like stiff and weird you've become. I distinctly remember being like, wow, I've become a weird shut-in. And, you know, after you have a few social interactions, you kind of shake it off and get back to normal. But if that was a relatively short amount of social isolation relative to Eleanor. So I bring that up mainly because I think we can all relate to that experience of having had a period of social isolation due to COVID, and then realizing that we were weird. Maybe, I don't know. Did you experience this?
I did. I don't have that kind of as acute a memory of the first social interaction post COVID that you do, but I definitely like had those moments where it felt weird to hang out with people. And there was, I mean, the weirdest thing that happened to me that I don't know why I remember this so specifically, but like, we had our first kid like in 2021, so the worst of the pandemic was over, but it was still definitely like happening. And we started daycare not long after that, and every daycare was still mask requirement for everyone. And so like all these women that were running the daycare and being the teachers, like I only saw them like their eyes for
Right.
like the first 5 months of my son's time at the daycare, and
Yeah.
then they finally relaxed the thing and they took off the masks, and I remember this really weird experience of like really meeting these people for the first time, and it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's your face, it looks different than I mean, this part of your face looks different than
Yeah.
just seeing another part. So
Right.
it was a really weird experience, and I think that is, I mean, I love that you've linked these two things together, because I think that's one of the reasons why it is so difficult for me to like sit here in my chair and like blame Eleanor really for the way that she is and the decisions she made and the events that happened in the book. It just kind of feels like she was almost all of this was almost outside of her control. And it's actually really interesting because one of the things I did, I knew you were going to like spend some time reading some criticism, and I thought, well, what I'll bring to the table is I'm going to go watch the 1963 version of the film. And I had seen that before, but it had been a while. And I looked at this as like, well, let's figure out like what their interpretation. So these people read this book when it came out and they said, wow, that's fascinating. I'm going to punch out a script of this book, and it's going to kind of be what my interpretation of the story is.
Mhm.
And one of the reason I'm bringing this up is because one of the adaptive choices that they made is at the very end of the book, when Eleanor is in the car driving away from Hill House, the wheel itself kind of like turns itself towards the tree, and eventually she lets it happen, but like it made it much more transparently clear that there was another force at work here, that was pushing her towards things, and that kind of aligns with what we're talking about here, that like whether that's a supernatural force or not, it was a force that dominated her life, like that's just the way her life played out, the type of person she was, both with whatever she just suffered and also the experiences that she went through with her mother. Which, by the way, I mean, it's kind of a side note here, I think it's really interesting how little the book does spend time on the relationship with her mother, because it seems like that's such a key formative relationship for her. And we never, like, you called her hateful mother, and like we know that Eleanor hated her mom, and we know that Eleanor's mom was knocking and Eleanor didn't hear it, and didn't bring her medicine, and so she kind of blames herself for her mother's death. But like, it's really interesting to me how little we actually learn definitively of like what the day-to-day relationship between her and her mother was. This is something that the movie, I think, agreed with that sentiment and made a little bit more explicit, that her mom was like constantly, like she constantly needed her. Anytime she was in the other room, even if she didn't need anything specifically, she just didn't want to be alone and would call her in. She'd like, there's a scene in the movie where she's complaining. It's like, I was just in the other room reading a magazine, and she would bound on the wall until I came in. And these are not things that the book does, right? Like, this is not that we don't get this little bit of information. And it's like, that's really fascinating, because like, wouldn't it have helped make this a little clearer if we had gotten a little bit of bits of information like that? It would have, but at what cost? Because like, if we follow our line of thinking of the author as a genius and everything is intentional, then that was not oops, I forgot to add a scene in which we really established that Eleanor's mom was kind of a jerk and kind of mistreated her. We're just going to like fill that in on the edges and know that she was unhappy. She was miserable in this caretaker role, and she felt trapped. And so we can maybe kind of color in what her mom was like from that, but we're not going to explicitly say that. And that all helps create this air of what is really going on here. What can we believe? What do we not believe? What Eleanor chooses to tell us and chooses not to tell us is all part of building that feeling that we have.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate you pointing out that I said her hateful mother, because you're absolutely right that there's nothing in the book that really substantiates that. And in fact, she could have been the sweetest old lady in the world, and it's just the fact that she requires Eleanor to constantly be around to physically care for her that is just grindingly exhausting over a period of years and years, that Eleanor can never get away from the house to have a date or get an education or make friends or any of these things.
Being a full-time caretaker, like regardless of the temperament of the person you're taking care of is an exhausting, overwhelming 24/7 job.
Yeah.
That many people that do that go through a lot of emotional turmoil, regardless of how much they love the person they're taking care of. It's a lot.
Yeah. So in fact, I retract my slur against her dear sainted mother.
I mean, I don't. I think it's there in the edges is what I'll say. But sure.
I don't think it's necessary to think that she was abusive to still believe that this was like a tragedy that befell Eleanor. Was just like, hey, somebody needs to take care of your mother. It's not going to be your sister. She's married and off somewhere else, and she can't afford full-time in-house nursing care. So it's going to be you, Eleanor, and that by itself is kind of enough to trap her. And yeah, I think that's right. And then the fact that she feels this horrible guilt over her mother's death, where she thinks maybe it was her fault, but maybe it was just a pure accident. I mean, can you really hold yourself responsible for like, got to connect everything to my own life, right? So like when you maybe hear the baby cry and baby needs to be fed, you kind of play a little game with yourself where you're like, I didn't really hear anything.
And then your wife gets furious at you because she's like, why am I always the one waking up? I don't know. I was out. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear it.
She was going to settle. I could tell it was the cry she makes when she's going to settle imminently. It's not my fault. Yeah. That was a very familiar feeling to me, to be like, and in all honesty, like I'm sort of being funny, but also when you're in the liminal space between sleep and wakefulness, you're not really yourself, actually. Like you're not making decisions. You're not like calculating. Right. You're just kind of reacting, and then maybe you're just like, you go back to sleep.
Yeah, but it's this weird thing where like even if you're not actively making decisions, your memory still works. So you think about that moment later. So like you're in this weird space between awake and asleep. You make a decision, maybe not even consciously, but then 2 hours later, you're fully aware you made that decision. Like my wife will leaves to work way before I do. Like I'm still sleeping when she goes to work because she's a principal at a elementary school and needs to be there at like 7 something, some absurd time. And like she'll say goodbye to me, and I always have this thing where like I'm like half asleep and half awake, and then there's days when I choose, maybe even subconsciously, to not wake up enough to say goodbye. So like, bye, I love you. Like I usually say that most days, but sometimes I'm like not conscious enough to say it. And then like 2 hours, an hour later, when I actually wake up, I'm like, oh, I didn't say goodbye to her. That's fucked up of me not to do that. But yeah, like in the moment, that's not like a conscious like choice that you're making. So really interesting thing that it's very easy to see how someone could blame themselves for that, but also like completely understandable that like, how was one supposed to know that of the hundreds and thousands of times over the years that my mother has beaten on the wall demanding my attention, this is the one time that if I had gone and given her medicine, perhaps she would have lived. And I mean, honestly, we don't even know if that's true. Like, here's the thing: what did her mother have?
Right,
and
we don't know.
Like, was it a degenerative condition where this was inevitable? Like probably, right? But the book withholds that information from us too. So like we are almost invited to be like Shirley Jackson is here, like, here, conclude on this, do it, judge. And then she's like, but did I give you enough information to actually make a full judgment? I don't think I did, actually. So enjoy that ambiguity, live in it.
Yes. 100%. No, this is great. I didn't think so much about her mom, but obviously, I think there's a good reason why we're focusing on this, because especially once you kind of take on the theory that all like the haunting, such as it is actually her guilt about her mother's death manifesting in a bunch of hallucinations around the house.
Sure.
And then there's other hallucinations that don't actually map onto that very well at all, which which could be a whole different conversation.
Mhm.
Then I think that kind of demands that you figure out, like, okay, well, then what was actually going on with her and her
Yeah.
mom?
Yeah, and I just want to like also here in this moment take a step back and like look at her journey through the book from that bird's eye, 500-foot level, because what we see here is a person who, just to remind ourselves, a person who spent her entire adult life up until this point with one person, with her mother, no social life, no friends, nothing. Her mother dies, she's carrying so much guilt from it, but then this thing happens where some random person, some random man reaches out to her with a letter and says, "Hey, I'm doing an experiment and you've been selected. You, Eleanor, have been selected to come do this thing. Come to live at this house with me and some other guests and spend the summer here." And it's this you can imagine. I mean, we saw this, but like it was so shrouded and hidden. But you can imagine this feeling of immense joy and purpose, and finally my ship has come in,
Mm-hmm.
and then how almost immediately that is squashed by the reality that is Hill House. Her reaction to Hill House at the end is not at the first time she sees it is very much because of the house is this evil thing, and like the overwhelming feeling of terror you get from it, but also maybe just it's I have put all my eggs in this basket. I have pinned my entire life on this one event that I've been waiting for this all my life. It's finally come. My ship has come in. Everything is going to be better now after this event because I will have a place. I will have people. I will have experiences. I will live life. And then she kind of sees it from the second she gets into Hill House throughout everything, it all starts to crumble down around her until the only thing she has left is the house, is the home, and even that is taken away from her at the end. And then she destroys herself.
Yeah. I like that it connects to that trick that Shirley Jackson must have borrowed from Stephen King, where she uses the sort of little saying, which we commented on before, but it connects to this idea where she keeps thinking journey's end and lovers meeting, and my recollection is that like the way the text frames it, it's like, oh, it's just a little random thought that's running through her head for no reason, but I think it's very much like she wants that to happen, like she's in her dream of how this is going to go. It's like she's going to fly the coop finally, and she's going on a journey, she's going on an adventure, and she's going to meet someone and fall in love, and they're going to and then everything's going to be great from then on, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just a meaningless little thing. It's at various times she thinks maybe it's going to be Theodora, maybe it's even going to be Luke for a minute there.
Yeah.
It basically anybody in her immediate environment could be her salvation. That's how desperate she is. And it all connects to that kind of refrain she has going through her head, I think.
I love that desperation leads her to, she goes from Theodora to Luke to maybe even Montague briefly, but eventually settles in her desperation on the house itself,
Mm-hmm.
on like this place, this awful, horrible, evil place is better than nothing. And she, in her, as everything crumbles around her, even her sanity, she grasps onto that idea of this place.
Yeah.
And gets her wish, right? She's going to be there forever now. Alone, walking the halls.
Yeah. Walking alone. I do have to correct myself. We don't know nothing about her mom. Her mom was like weird and paranoid about she thought the neighbors threw the rocks at the house or whatever. So her mom came off as being kind of paranoid and shut in adjacent already. And but again, I don't want to overinterpret that as being like, oh, she was just a monster. Anyway,
it is not hard to build a character of her mother in her head that matches, speaking of the rocks falling on the house, that matches Margaret White from Stephen King's Carrie. Like it is not beyond the ability of belief to say that she was a person like that was kind of unhinged and also suffering from a debilitating illness. So Eleanor was warped by her, both in her duties and by the type of person she was. I don't think it's beyond the pale to make that assumption. I do, just to repeat myself, think it's interesting that Shirley Jackson chooses not to fill in those blanks with anything definitive.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess I want to kind of start to move the conversation towards the other characters now, and see if we can kind of fill in those blanks as well, because I do think these are really fascinating characters that, once again, like, I think it is very, very, like, they're drawn very specifically in the opening pages of this book. Like, we get this kind of quick cut through each of them, and we get their, like, defining attributes. Like, who is Theodora? Well, she's a person that only goes by Theodora. She has no last name. She's Bohemian. She is an artist. She's not married. She lives with a partner, possibly woman. Don't know for sure. I think that is a fair read, but again, those blanks aren't filled. We know she comes to the house almost on an impulse. She has a big fight with her roommate, partner, whatever, in the night. She wasn't going to come. Then she has a big fight and runs out in the middle of the night, basically, to get away from that person. So we know she makes, like, rash, big decisions about things without really talking to people around her. And then we put her in this house, and then we put her next to Eleanor, a person who worships her. And we see all the ways in which Theodora pings off her that way. So again, it is difficult to really try to dissect these characters in a book in which we are not 100% sure which elements of the character are accurate, which are just from Eleanor's point of view, and indeed which are just not happening at all, right? But that doesn't mean we can't try a little bit here. So
yeah,
Theodora, Matt, what are your Theo thoughts right now?
Yeah. So first, just like you said, I mean, because we don't know in many cases what actually happened, there's a risk that you just kind of project what you want to believe. But if you sit back and think about what happens to Theodora and the way she behaves over the course of the story, it's like, yeah, as you described, she starts out being very flighty, bohemian, just goes where the wind blows her. I feel like this story is like the introduction of the concept of consequences to Theodora, something that she's never had to deal with before, where she's sort of like, she's trapped with this person who she sort of resonates with in this particular way, where they both seem to have this ability. I really love the idea of using supernatural things to underline things that are real, right? So you take, I don't know, I relate to this in some ways, where it's like you take a really outgoing, vibrant, vivacious person, and you pair them up with a socially inexperienced, anxious, and unconfident person, and that can be a very, I would say, volatile dynamic in real life, setting aside all superpowers and psychic powers, because the shyer person can attach themselves to the more vivacious person, and the vivacious person might really like that. They might think that's awesome. This person, finally someone appreciates me for how great I am, But then there begins to be a sort of toxicity that can emerge if the relationship doesn't evolve, and the shy person loosens up eventually. It becomes a more equal friendship, and it just the more outgoing person starts to resent this drag that they have on them, and then the more shy person just starts to feel like they're not being respected, and that the person doesn't actually like them, and all of this is stuff that I feel like I've seen and maybe even participated in one side or the other of this throughout my life, and I feel like that's the dynamic we're seeing here, except it's amplified by the fact that they both have some shine going on, and that takes all of those things I just said and it makes them worse. That and then Theodora sees, so to carry that forward just to the end, I guess, I think Theodora sees like the effect of her being her Theodora self on this person and kind of how it negatively impacts Eleanor. And Theodora doesn't like to see that because it's like, I'm not responsible for you.
Sure.
I never claimed responsibility for you. You're throwing yourself onto me. Where did I incur this obligation to you, Eleanor?
Yeah.
And Eleanor, that's the way I see that. And yet at the end, I think that she does feel this sense of like, oh, I fucked this up, didn't I? because of the last scene, really is why I say that.
Yeah.
Where she's almost like desperate to be like, oh, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Just go home.
Yeah, call me. Yeah.
Call me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I agree with everything you just said. I do think the mind reading adds this really fascinating wrinkle in here. And it again, this is not something the book allows us to do or even invites us to do really by its very limited controlled perspective. But like, you can almost kind of imagine what it's like to be Theodora meeting and reading the mind of this woman. Like, we get to see into Eleanor's mind and it kind of drives us insane, right? And we at least have some of the backstory of who she is and where she's coming from, both emotionally and mentally and just historically. Imagine if you're Theodora and you're only picking up like snippets and pieces of the stuff that's going through Eleanor's mind, and how like terrifying, exhausting and pity inducing that must be based on any given moment. Like, Eleanor swings from I hate myself, why am I like this, to desperately trying to convince herself I'm happy, I've earned happiness, I should be happy, to I hate this person, she's awful, I want to kill this woman, to I'm disgusting, no, it's me. And just she's swinging back and forth so wildly. And maybe in perspective of that, like, the perception is that Theodora's view on Eleanor, at least from Eleanor's perspective, is also swinging back and forth wildly, right? Like, it just seems like she goes from one extreme to the other, where she like is very fast friends with her, to good friends to her, to angry and pissed off at her, to maybe attracted to her, to indifferent to her, to mad to her again, and then at the very end, like, sorry and a little mournful. And like, tracking that through the perspective of the book is like exhausting, because you're just like, wait a minute, what why is that happening? But like, flip that around and you could make the same argument about Theodora's feelings, the things that are emanating from Eleanor towards her are like equally all over the place.
Totally. Yeah. I also, just in terms of relatability, like, maybe I'm just a very dramatic and labile person, but like, think about like the first. So how long is this? Like 3 nights, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Think about
maybe
like
4.
The first 3 or 4 nights you were at college. Like, there's a year's worth of like little social dynamics crammed into that time window, right? And that's kind of what this is. Kind of, I just bring that up because like that's kind of what this is, at least for Eleanor, where it's like, I'm gonna make a friend, and this is extremely important.
Yeah.
And so it's like she's speed running, trying to make a friend here, but she doesn't know how to do it. She's bad at it. And Theodora, for her part, and then basically everything you just said, where it's like, well, she has to play the other side of the court to this onslaught of emotional chaos.
Yeah.
I still think that Theodora just knew that Eleanor wrote the words the entire time and didn't quite know how to deal with that. Like, if we're taking the interpretation that you posed last week, that all the happenings of the house are just Eleanor's power, kind of even subconscious to her, then she wrote in blood on the wall of Theodora's room, she wrote in chalk in the hallway, that all these things that Eleanor accuses her of, she just did. And like, I think it's really interesting that from Eleanor's perspective, Theo kind of barbing her with like what about your small little apartment? These things that like from our perspective we knew like this is Eleanor lying. Like Theo also knows it's Eleanor lying, and like let's say like everything that we've said is true, and all the interactions and kind of the craziness of the interactions, and the Eleanor coming on so strong, and then her brain doing all this stuff, and Theo's picking up all this. Now also add to this equation that she's fucking lying about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Eleanor and Theodora knows that, but doesn't know the why, right? Like, so let's say you meet a new person and you're having a 10-minute conversation with them, and then a little cricket jumps on your shoulder and whispers into your ear that like 6 of the 20 things they just told you are complete bullshit and not real at all.
Uh-huh.
What would that do to the social interaction from your perspective, right? Because you would kind of be like, okay, that's weird.
Yeah. Like I was having a fun time until I realized you were lying to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it calls into question kind of everything, right?
And the little, yeah, gosh, what an interesting framing. I love this because, man, okay. So up until now, I had really been seeing Theodora's little jabs as jabs, where it's like she's sort of mocking her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what Eleanor's take on it is. So yeah.
But I like what you're saying right now, where it's like, I'm mentioning this out loud to give you a chance to not do this as much.
Yeah, to explain yourself. Yeah,
it's like when my daughter, one of my daughters is standing there, and she's like, "My brother was the one who poured the red paint on the carpet," and I'm like, "And what does that have to do with why your hands are covered in red paint?" And it's like, I'm giving you the opportunity to come clean here. That's what this is. This is not I'm not being mean. I'm trying to crack the door open to help you out here. I actually, though, I really like this idea that Theodora is sort of in as playful a way as possible, being like, stop lying to me all the time. It's
why?
I don't know why you're doing that. Don't do that.
I mean, it's really fascinating because I think in social interactions, people lie to each other all the time, right? Like you're telling a story, you might exaggerate one element of the story, right? Because it makes a better story than the reality of what you're telling. Mm-hmm. You exaggerate who you are, you exaggerate your situation. Like people tend to exaggerate in social situations. And Eleanor is essentially doing a version of that, but it's a version because Eleanor is kind of, I mean, and I think this is just true, is kind of desperate to be a different person than the person she is. And I think part of her journey through the book is that version of herself is calling out to her and kind of pulling her back in a way that scares the hell out of her. And so like like everything else in this book, I think it's like normal social interaction, but heightened by the location, the character's backstory, and yes, the special superpowers that they have. That like imagine a world in which you knew every time someone was telling a story and exaggerating a bit of the story, and you knew that was untrue and exaggeration. That would be difficult to live because you would probably just kind of be the type of person that just has to learn to let it go. Right. But then maybe they're so close together, and then so I mean they're all trapped in this house together that like Theo just at some point cannot let it go anymore.
Right. I think you can let go a certain amount of that. Like I basically expect people to embellish details when they're just kind of telling a story, but one of my daughters never actually poured red paint on the carpet and then lied about it. That was made up, but meant to represent the sort of thing that happens with kids. Like as an example of me lying to you just now.
Can't believe you.
But like if a person does that habitually, not just habitually, but like in ways where it's like, I don't even know why you lied about that. Like, yeah. And then also the stuff with the chalk and the ruining her clothes and stuff. It's like, okay, this has ceased to be harmless.
I mean, we all had that person, that one friend growing up that was the fucking liar kid, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not just a Scott experience, right? His name was Greg in 7th grade.
I've had that friend as a adult, and yeah, it's exhausting.
He told me he had $1 million in stocks because his parents gave him some money to invest, and he invested very well. And like the reason I remember Greg so much is because this was my first experience with lying, where I just believed him, because why would I not believe that story? Why would you just make up bullshit to tell me unprompted? Like, all the lying that I had done and experienced up until that point in my life was to get out of trouble. Just like lying to avoid something. But this was lying unprompted to create something, and my little brain could not understand it. And I went home and told this stuff to my parents, who just laughed and were like, "No, that's not true."
Yeah.
Like, why would he do that?
My friend kid told me that he was running down the street and there was a tornado, and the tornado picked him up, but then set him back down gently. And I was like, wow.
Oh man.
Really?
I bet Greg told that same story, honestly. Man, he just lied about everything. Like, literally everything. Sorry to put you on blast, Greg. I don't remember your last name, but he's probably a billionaire now.
Yeah, he probably actually had that money.
So I think from that perspective, Theo's journey is pretty interesting in this. That like, the way she handles herself is not perfect, but also understandable.
Exactly. That it's so backgrounded. It's funny. Before we had this conversation, I was like, I don't know what's going on with Theo, and now I'm pretty sure that we got at least some amount of this right. That it's like, she kind of feels annoyed and put upon by this woman, but also maybe a little bit flattered, but also kind of confused by the fact that she's lying constantly, and I think gradually dawning awareness of how disturbed Eleanor actually is, and trying to keep things together. You never hate Theodora. Yeah, you never hate her. I think as the reader, like, even though Eleanor is swings wildly on her, I was never at any point like, oh God, Theodora's awful. If anything, Theodora sort of defends her to Mrs. Montague, and is kind of, I think I said, like, big sisterly at certain points. So
yeah, I mean, I think one thing Shirley Jackson does such a good job of here is that, like, we are in Eleanor's perspective, but like it is a close third person, but not too close, where I think we're just removed enough to where we can kind of see the irrationality of the behavior. Like, you can imagine a version of the story, and we're so in sync with what Eleanor is doing and experiencing that we just don't like Theo, because Theo is being a jerk to her. She's being mean, and she's attacking her, and she's trying to expose her insecurities and discomforts and her lies of in Eleanor's mind, necessity to create this new person, this new version of herself. But we don't actually feel that way ever, because what you and I felt was confusion, and if we did feel anger, it's almost like general anger, not at any particular person, of like, why is this happening? What's going on here? And that is, it seems to me, like one of those writing tricks that's really, really hard to pull off, because you want to be close, but not too close. I think it's clear to me that Shirley Jackson wanted us to feel like Eleanor's behavior is confusing and inconsistent. But also to still create a feeling of paranoia, where we did go, hey, why is Theo being like really mean to her right now? Why is that actually? And were the men right when they just assumed that Theo was doing that intentionally to keep Eleanor being afraid? Or was Eleanor right in that that's not what she was doing at all, and it's just because she actually hates me? I don't know. I get the feeling that something is not adding up here, but we are never given all the integers to actually add them up and to get the answer.
Right. I keep thinking back to that one intro scene where Eleanor's in the coffee shop, and it's just this perplexing, Sudoku where you're not given enough numbers to to continue extending your metaphor. You're just like, I don't know what happened in this scene actually. And that's how, like, that's the ambiguity, that you're just left with that. You're just like, well, neither does Eleanor. Good luck.
I wonder if we can take a step back here and make, like, it's really interesting to me that Shirley Jackson is writing a story about, do ghosts exist? Like, that is essentially the question that is bringing all these characters. The inciting incident that is bringing all these characters to this house is that a doctor is trying to scientifically verify the existence of the supernatural. And it is a book in which we get no definitive answer about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Almost as if to say, broadly, that the quest to find evidence of something supernatural is as futile as the quest to understand what exactly happened in this house. That generally this idea of mankind's desire for this aspect or this shade of existence to be quantifiable and understandable and studyable and measurable and is impossible.
Like that. It's unquantifiable for the same reason that what exactly happened in The Haunting of Hill House is unquantifiable. Can't be nailed down because it's ambiguous and it's subjective. I think that's I think an important concept to bring in here is, like, the great lie of science, and I say this as a scientist, is that there exists such a thing as objectivity, when really there is not. There is, everyone has their own subjectivity, their own perception, their own perspective on things, and we come to something like objectivity by making measurements and having the measurements be repeatable, and other people doing the same measurements and coming to the same results. That's how we sort of synthesize objectivity, but it's not true objectivity. And especially when it comes to, I think Shirley Jackson might say, when it comes to the supernatural, really all you have is subjectivity in the first place. All you have is what you perceived, what Eleanor perceived in this house, which is probably different from what Theo and Luke and Montague perceived. And thus, how are you ever going to come to some objective conclusion about what's actually going on in the house?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love this as a person who, as we've said multiple times throughout the course of this book, I do not believe that any of this stuff actually exists, right? And yet, perhaps I have a unreasonable level of expectation for what it would take to prove to me that this stuff actually does exist, right? Because even like, I've never had anything like specific to like a ghost experience or a haunting experience or anything like that. But I know myself, and I know if anything like that happened, I would explain it away in one of the many ways of our brain has this remarkable ability to create things in our environment that are or are not real. And I would explain it away that way. And like, that is also unverifiable, right? Like, and yet I would cling to it. So yeah, I mean, I like this generally. I also like this as just like the quest to understand people. I know there's like sciences behind understanding how the brain works and how people work, and I have utmost respect for all those things, but it is also kind of like, Eleanor is a person who is suffering from so many different things, and is almost impossible to fully understand. And that is kind of one of the declarative statements of this book, is that no one can truly understand who she was and what she was going through. To the point where it was incredibly isolating in any environment. Yeah. All right, Matt. I've been avoiding this, but let's talk about Luke, because this is I think book analysis on hard mode is what is the story doing with Mr. Luke.
Yeah.
I once again have to return to the way he was defined in the story, right?
Mhm.
The first words we learn about him is that he's a liar and a thief, that he is a card shark, that he takes money from people by cheating at games. He is the heir of this rich family who is completely uninterested in going into any of the family business or earning money for himself or any of those things. He's just kind of leeching off of his aunt, I believe, is the owner of the house, leeching off of his family, leeching off of their riches and wealth, and just kind of like just chill, just like rolling through life in that manner. So what is Luke's experience at Hill House, Matt?
Yeah. Okay. So just another, I think, important piece of information here is the whole idea that he never had a mother, which he tells us, but is also true. He's not lying about this.
Correct. Yep.
And he strikes me as the sort of person who has no core identity. He becomes who he thinks you want him to be. So this makes him very charming and, superficial in many ways. And everything we've said up until this point sounds really negative. But the funny thing about the book is that he never seems to do anything actually bad at any point. And if anything, he seems to be mildly heroic a couple times. Like he kind of goes out of his way to make sure people are okay when there's weird haunting stuff happening. He's the one who climbs the rickety stair to save Eleanor.
Yeah.
It's like you introduce this rogue, and then he is not a rogue at all. He's kind of a stand-up guy, and yeah, he's kind of like wishy-washy in the way that I think many people are, especially when they're young. Can't hardly hate him for that. And then in terms of like what is his arc, I wish I had something smart to say here, because I did want to figure this out. Like, his character is such a black box to me.
Yeah. It's really interesting because like the one thing we establish him definitively is this idea that he cheats at cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have him play games with Montague many times throughout the course of the story, but it is never made clear to us whether he is winning, when he does win, if he is winning via cheating or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. And again, like the kind of, I think a lot of what Jackson is doing here is setting up certain amounts of expectations of who these people are, and then throwing them into a place and watching as they don't quite gel with our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, like a traditional version of this character, we're going to see him lie. We're going to see him, let's have him cheat. We're going to see him maybe what Theo kind of says he's doing with Eleanor, that he's taking advantage of her naivete, is something we would actually see in the story, but we don't really, unless you want to read that conversation, and maybe that is a fair read of the conversation, is that he is coming to her with the I never had a mother thing in an attempt to manipulate her into falling for him. But I don't feel that. I don't.
Yeah, my take was like, manipulate her to what end? Like he really doesn't
just
seem
want to
like
sleep with her, because he doesn't try. Yeah,
he doesn't try at all. He never. I just didn't read it that way. Maybe, but I just didn't see it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the closest thing I have to a through line is something that actually starts being referred to Luke near the end of the book, which is that he's a coward. And then, we do have, as you said, the moment where he decides to climb up the spiral staircase, the rickety spiral staircase, to save Eleanor, is a moment of genuine bravery and concern of another human being, and kind of loss of selfishness. And maybe it is a tale of this guy kind of growing up. He sees Hill House as this, I'm going to inherit this thing, and this is going to be great. And he sees Hill House as for what it is, and he wants to leave it ultimately, and save someone else, and cares for someone else. But man, that's established so late in the story. It is just really interesting. By the way, I think it's a really funny thing that the movie does.
the 1963 movie, is it gives basically everything Eleanor had with Luke, and it gives it to Montague, who they've renamed in the movie. So she hits on him, not knowing that he's married, and then he is actually the one that climbs the staircase to bring her down, which is really funny. I think it matches the ages of the characters a little bit better, but it also like completely removes Luke's functionality in the story of the movie at all. Like he essentially does nothing. He just comes off as the defining characteristic of just this kind of roguish cad who is really likes drinking and playing games, and that's it. That's really it.
Which is not a character, right?
Yeah.
He saves her from the staircase, but then they do let her go in the car.
Yeah.
Which I guess if you squint, you can kind of see as an act of cowardice. But I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't think we have a hand. And I was hoping, like, over the course of the next week, because I posed that question to you at the end of last week's episode, is like, why did it seems so clear that the other characters are really pushing that we shouldn't leave Eleanor alone. We should make sure, we should take her home. And all three of the other guests of the house are just like, no. She needs to do this on her own. She'll be fine. And of course she was not. I don't have an answer for why we did that. I was hoping one would come to me over the past 7 days, and it did not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good answer. I did realize, by the way, that I did see the Owen Wilson haunting.
Oh, you did?
Like possibly even in theaters. And I don't remember at what point I put this together. I think it was literally since the last time we recorded that I was just like, wait, no, that's not that movie, is it? Because it has nothing to do with this. I mean, it's people go to a haunted house and that's about where it ends in terms of connections.
Yeah. I mean, there is the creator of the house is a man named Hugh Crane, and that's about it. It's so I didn't rewatch that movie, by the way, because that movie is so far off of what the story is, whereas the 63 version actually hewed pretty close to what the story and theming of the book is. I think it did about as good a job as you can do of capturing Eleanor's kind of internal collapse, and it made the hauntings and the bangings and the moments of the house like genuinely like upsetting in this 1963 black and white version of this story. Really, really effective. Actually, it's definitely creepy in ways that the 99 version is just not at all.
Yeah. So I only mention this here because of the fact that Owen Wilson plays Luke. And I remember like the only thing I remember about that movie is him like trying to heroically do something at the end and then being killed by the house, basically, because the house is much more overtly evil. And
do you remember how it's done?
I think it's like a statue like crushes his head or something. So
for whatever reason, there's a very big fireplace in this house, and it's established that the fireplace, like the thing that I forget what it's called, the flue, I guess it is, the thing that opens the flue, is this large lion head, like absurdly large lion head that like it was established earlier in the thing when they were messing around with the fireplace, just suddenly sometimes would detach and swing, and so it decapitates him. It swings out of the fireplace and decapitates him.
Perfect. No notes. Perfect adaptation.
And look, I mean, we're about to spend 10 weeks on an adaptation that takes a lot of liberties with the story. So like, I don't think I'm making fun of the 99 Hill House just because it decided to do something different with the story. It is a really fascinating like exploration into what ghost stories and horror movies were at the time, and how everything subtle about this book and the 63 version of the film is gone, and it's all very explicit. The house is indeed haunted. We see ghosts, we see crying baby statues turning their heads. It turns Eleanor's story into one of like, the house needs her to be the mother to the children that Hugh Crane brought into the house and murdered. Like apparently he just like would bring children in and murder them. So there's all these children ghosts living in the house, and they need a mother, and they're desperate for a mother. And Eleanor is the person that they're calling to be the mother of. It's fucking wild, man.
Yeah. I mean, they get the concept of a mother in there, which is an important concept in the story.
Yeah,
so
sure, did that. Yeah, the 63 movie, quite good. I heartily recommend that one. I think a good adaptation. I don't think it quite, like, it does kind of by definitionally have to get rid of a lot of the ambiguity of what is really happening here. What can we believe and not believe? It, like, any adaptation has to do that, right? Because you're taking yourself out of the character's head, and Shirley Jackson is controlling so much of what we know by limiting so much of our perspective. Like, for a perfect example of this is the giant statue we talked about in the 63 version. We see the statue and we are told textually that this is Saint Francis curing the lepers. Like, whereas in the book, everyone had a different interpretation of what the statue was, and they try to add some creepiness to it by saying, "Hey, the people in the statues kind of look like us a little bit. That's weird." It's effective, but it just kind of gets, I think, as close as possible you can to generating the feeling of reading this book without actually fully doing it. So I think it is successful in what it's trying to do, but not perfectly successful in recreating what reading this novel is like.
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the fact that, like, if we're right that one of the main things the novel's trying to do is say something about subjectivity and ambiguity of perspective, it's like, okay, well, if your tool for telling the story is a camera and microphones, there's a lot less room for ambiguity. Although, I don't want to say that too harshly, but plenty of filmmakers have managed to come up with all kinds of creative ways to portray things in a way that ends up being ambiguous. So,
all right. So what about Dr. Montague? What else can we say about him? What is his journey through this book is one of, a man, scientist trying to definitively prove that ghosts exist, that hauntings exist, that this place is haunted. He is a character complicated by the fact that his relationship with his wife is fascinating. That there's a lot of kind of between the lines stuff going on there. Whether or not she is with her driver Arthur in a sexual way is implied but not outright stated. How are you feeling about Montague and his journey throughout the book? Because I think the one note we leave him with at the end of the story is he published his first of what was planned to be many scientific articles about his experiences in this house and their experience in this house, and it was met with indifference and mockery, and he just kind of gave up, and that's the end for Montague.
I think that's basically it. I think he was somebody who had the arrogance to think that he was going to go, scientifically figure out what was going on in this place that he heard stories of. But first of all, he's not a very good scientist, as we made fun of him for. I think even if he had been a good scientist, I don't think, like we said a bit ago, I don't think he could have ever, conceivably quantified what was going on here.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that he seems like a dilettante who doesn't really have any sort of systematic way of going about this. And then you almost later on in the story, you wonder, like, is he even really into this, or is this just kind of a thing that his wife is into, and he kind of has almost been like painted into a corner of like, well, now this is my career, I guess, because she's so passionate about it. Or I'm probably projecting a bit here, but I guess I'm just highlighting the fact that, like, she is a paranormal, investigator in her own mind, at least.
Yeah. And the ghost hunters on the Learning Channel sense of the phrase.
Yes, exactly. And it seems like this is like a point of contention for them, is like, what's the correct way to go about being a ghost hunter?
Yeah.
Which channel of Ghost Hunter is the appropriate kind.
Another thing that I think is really interesting that the 63 film changed, by the way, she does come to the house still. She is a doubter. She thinks this is all bullshit and doesn't buy into any of it. And so that is their point of conflict is not that they are taking different approaches to accomplish the same objective, but that she doesn't believe any of this and thinks he's silly and wasting his time.
Yeah.
She comes to believe it though when she gets lost in the house and then magically ends up in the attic. So there's a whole thing with her that they do in the movie that's very, very different.
So part of me thinks that maybe the idea with Mr. and Mrs. Montague is like they're actually coming from very different places. Tell me if you agree with me on this. So he doesn't even necessarily seem convinced of the fact that anything supernatural is happening at all. Like he's there because he wants to be convinced, because he wants to believe, in the Scott Mulder sense. Sorry, Fox Mulder. Your name is Scott.
I'll take it. I'll be Scott Mulder.
Scott Mulder, Fox Mulder's brother. He wants to believe. So like he tries to measure the cold spot. But when he sees something in the hallway, he goes, "Oh, must be my imagination." He doesn't take it in stride that it's like, "Ah, yes, a supernatural apparition, as I expect to see because I'm in a haunted house." Whereas she's like on the other end of the spectrum. She fully believes, like actually believes. What she's desperate for is contact and like for this to be about her, basically.
Yeah,
because she's doing the automatic writing or the planchette rather, the Ouija board, or is it automatic writing? I guess no, it's just a Ouija board, right?
No, it's writing.
Okay,
it's a planchette just on paper.
Okay,
with a pencil.
So she's doing automatic writing basically, and she's kind of trying to make herself the protagonist of the story by saying like, the nuns who've been walled up, they keep reaching out to me. And I think she believes that, by the way. Like, I think that this is crucial to her character is she's not making this up. Well, she is, but she's not doing it on purpose. She thinks that the nuns are reaching out to her. She thinks that some entity in this house has reached out to her and caused her to write these things. And of course, the entity in the house is Eleanor, according to our theory, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you vibe with me on this like kind of distinction between these two characters?
Yeah, 100%. I think I think it's so great that you reminded me of the fact that it is a little absurd for him to have an experience by himself in the hallway and then push that off of himself and say, no, that couldn't be. Like, that doesn't actually make a lot of sense. When you are there specifically to study the supernatural. And so maybe he is a person coming from this from more a place of doubt in the reality of it. And then his journey through the story is then realizing that something is very, very real. And he kind of underestimated. I think a lot of it is them underestimating the danger of this stuff. And it is not the physical danger of the house because, again, nothing in the house hurts anyone ever. There is no physical harm done to any character in the story by the house itself. It is only ultimately their own choices, like that Eleanor dies by deliberately driving her car into a tree, whether you believe that's kind of pushed and manipulated by this evil presence or just by her own self. I don't know. But yeah, like he does kind of come off in some ways as like a boy playing with matches a little bit here. He's playing in stuff and trying to understand stuff without a full understanding of what that means. What it being real could mean.
Right. I mean, he approaches the idea of a haunted house sort of the way that I approach the idea of a haunted house, where it's like, I'm going to go figure out what's actually going on here. Not because if I actually believe there was a ghost in that house, I'm not going in that house. So I think this really highlights the difference between those two characters, him and his wife. And then as for Arthur, what Arthur thinks about all of this, I think Arthur just kind of rolls along with things, honestly. I don't know that he has an opinion.
Maybe he's just getting laid and enjoying it. He thinks it's funny to show up in front of the man whose wife he's sleeping with.
See, but maybe I'm being contrarian, but I feel like that's such a sort of clear implication that I want to be like, no, he just enjoys being like a servant, like in his worldview. Because here's one thing we haven't talked about a lot in this conversation, although we talked about it last week, is like the idea of like roles being an important concept in the story.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Montague in particular, like wanting to put everyone in their role and everyone sort of having a proxy role that they kind of automatically fall into, and Mrs. Montague like not knowing what to do with Eleanor because she doesn't fall into any category.
Yeah.
And like Arthur, this is my, again, probably contrarian and silly take, is like Arthur just enjoys being the role of like the sort of footman to the aristocracy.
Yeah.
And he's actually not stupping her. He's just enjoys this view of himself, I don't know.
Yeah. I like that. I'm glad you brought up the role thing again, because I think that's so true. And one thing that's, I think for certain, is none of our 4 central characters are necessarily fulfilling their roles correctly. Like Montague, not, as you said, not really a great scientist, not fulfilling the role of a man of science, not really fulfilling the role of a husband either. Arthur is kind of taking his place as the traditional husband role. Eleanor, I mean, impossible to fit in any role, right? She has, there's the thing about Eleanor is there's not even, as you said, the reason why Mrs. Montague doesn't know what to do with her, because there's no specific role for her that society is defining that she's failing to live up to. Like, you could argue that Theodora is, a young woman that should be doing the things that women are expected of women, right? She should be marrying someone and starting a family and having children and all these things. And she's not really fulfilling that role. Society doesn't even seem like it really expects that of Eleanor. Yeah. Like, she's so kind of unmoored and lost that she doesn't even have a role that people are looking at her and saying, no, you should be doing this.
And I think that, on some level she detects that, and that's maybe one of the reasons why she's so horribly lost is, it's one thing to feel like you're not fitting your role very well. It's another thing to sort of twist what you just said, for society to have given up even trying to force you into a role.
Yeah.
You're just refuse now.
Yeah. I mean, what must that feel like as a person, that it's like for your entire life, you're kind of, I'm trying to imagine like what it must have been like to be Shirley Jackson growing up in a world that's like trying to make her into this certain thing. And like, what happens when the world gives up on even trying to do that? What must that feel like as a human being? It was like, no, you have to do this. You have to do this. This is your plan. This is your path. You're a woman. This is what you're supposed to do as a woman. And you keep bucking against that because that doesn't feel right to you. And then eventually one day the world says, okay, fine. I don't know what to do with you anymore. And so I'm just not going to do anything. And you're like, well, wait. I mean, I need to do something. There has to be some place for me. There has to be some home for me. There has to be some point of me. And what that must that be like if you can't even find that? Essentially, that is what Eleanor is going through, right? It's like her purpose up until this point has been caretaker for mother.
Yeah,
mother is dead. What is your purpose now? What is your point? What do you do in life? It's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I go on adventures? Do I find a home for myself? None of this stuff fits. It doesn't work. I try the romance thing with Luke. That doesn't work. I try the friendship thing with Theodora. That doesn't work. I try the parental figure thing with Dr. Montague. That's not really working either. I find this house, and it feels wrong too. I don't fit anywhere.
I love that. I mean, I hate it because it's horribly sad and, like quite dark and hopeless. It gives me a very hopeless feeling to even think about this idea. But definitely that's where she is. I'm just going to like do the thing where I repeat what you just said, because I thought it was so like just nailed it. Is like, yeah, she did have a role. It wasn't one that she liked, and then now she just doesn't have a role at all. She's desperate to make. She's like panicking, basically. Like, I have to find, journey's in and lovers meeting. Journey's in and lovers meeting. That it'll work out somehow. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
So sad. All right. I want to wrap up today looking forward a little bit. We've got a 10-episode television series coming up. We're going to be spending the next 2.5 months really diving into the details of this Mike Flanagan show. I'm very excited about this, by the way. This is what we created the show for. Mm-hmm. This original idea was I wanted to really dive into Haunting of Hill House, talk about the show. So we're on the cusp of it, and I'm very excited. But before we do that, and before I even ask you like what you think the show is going to do with the source material, I did want to talk. Maybe we could like try to distill down the themes of this book. Like maybe play quickly the role of, if we were going to adapt this, what core ideas would we shrink this very complex, the short but very complex novel down to? Mm-hmm. What do you think? Like, what are in your mind the core things that even if a director, I think I've been honest with you and said that this is a loose adaptation of this novel, but that it still needs to capture the core of what the story was. So what are those? What is that core that you would think, oh, this would fail as an adaptation if it doesn't include X?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what we talked about today had to do with the idea of these incredibly intricate social dynamics between people, and how things are further complicated by, again, the bias that is introduced by a person's own perspective, the subjectivity, and the fact that everyone is sort of seeing the situation differently. So that's one thing that I think film has a totally different set of tools for doing that, but I think film can do that. It can show things from different people's perspectives, right? You can do the thing. We kind of talked about this last week. We talked about the scene from American Psycho, where it's like you can really screw with like how you're perceiving a social situation in all kinds of ways. And that's I think a big part of what the story is doing. Is like, what are your relationships to others? What is your role with respect to others? And then how does a person's skewed perspective intersect with that?
Yeah.
What do you? I know you've seen the TV show, but like,
I'm trying to be careful here, because like I could very easily say like, well, you would need to include this for sure. No, but I think you're definitely onto something there. That social interactions, how people interact with each other, how people perceive those interactions, and how your own kind of biases get in the way of relationships sometimes is something that seems at the core of this. Mm-hmm. I think there's also, I think there, in my mind, would have to be a strong relationship between a child and a mother. I think would be maybe a driving force of some of the events, not necessarily like the thing that the whole thing circles around, but part of it for sure. Mm-hmm. I would want the house. So the house is an interesting question, right? Like I would want the house to be at the center of everything. And I'm not even saying necessarily that I need an adaptation to say whether or not ghosts are real or not. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with either interpretation, but like the house has to be at the center of whatever's going on in the story, I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, I just at the most surface level, you have to have some scary stuff happening. You have to have, regardless of whether the ghosts are real, you have to have scary stuff happening. Yeah, I think that's a requirement of anything that purports to be an adaptation of this book.
Yeah, and I mean, like I don't know, like I you think about the character of Eleanor, and it's like, does the story need Eleanor to be Eleanor? And by the way, I'm struggling with this mightily because again, yeah, I know I'm asking questions to which I already know all the answers to. But like, you think about, do we need her to be drawn in the same way, or can we get to the core of what Ellen and who Eleanor is by doing something different with it?
So I know we're not. I know that the question you asked me is not like, what do you think Mike Flanagan's going to do? But I do keep thinking about the fact that a 10-episode TV show, basically 10 hours of TV, like not literally, but basically, that's a lot. That's a lot of story.
Yeah.
So it's so like, if you gave me 10 hours to do this, I'm like, okay, I can't. There's not enough in this book to do 10 hours of scenes. You've got to go into backstories. You got to expand on these characters and who they are and where they're from and how they got here and why. And you thread that through everything. So like, if you're going to keep it to the main cast, which you don't have to, but you have Theodora, Luke, Montague, Eleanor, and then if you want to be a close adaptation, then you bring in Montague's wife and Arthur later, which I if I was going to do an adaptation, that would be something I might leave on the chopping block, just because I'm like, I don't necessarily see how that's like central to the themes.
Sure.
I don't hate it. I kind of like it, actually. I just might take our core cast and then flesh them out a lot, give us a lot more, again, show a lot of scenes of like their life before they got to the house, and basically let things expand, which would have the side effect, I think, of kind of reducing this ambiguity and this subjectivity that we're talking about, where it becomes more of a drama and less of like a kind of avant-garde deconstruction of a ghost story.
Yeah.
But I think that's fine because, well, yeah, it's like what slice of the thing do you want to adapt is the way to think about it.
It's so funny because, again, we're coming at this from the perspective of, I know that Flanagan's adaptation of this novel is very good. Like, I know that. I love this show. Spoilers for the next 10 weeks. I deeply love this show. I watched it multiple times. I think it's really a mastercraft in how to tell an extended and yet still episodic story that by the way, I think really serves for our overarching journey with Mike Flanagan. I think this is one thing I want to make sure to mention here so we can revisit it as we go through these 10 episodes. I think it is a kind of a perfect culmination of everything he's done up until this point. It kind of takes all the things he's been interested in, all the things he's explored, and the themes and ideas, and really solidifies and crystallizes them into this thing that I think is staggeringly beautiful. But anyway, if you had told me before I had seen that and I had just read this book and you said they were going to turn The Haunting of Hill House into a 10-episode Netflix series, I would have rolled my eyes so hard that they would have fallen out of my head. Like the idea of taking this, as you said, avant-garde, fascinating novel. And it's not as if it didn't already have bad adaptations. We've talked about the failures of the 1991 adaptation already. But just to try to prestige TVify it would have just driven me insane, actually. And again, hindsight's 2020. I live in a world now where I know we do that exact thing and we pull it off brilliantly because we have one of the best working horror directors writing and creating it and show running it. But man, yeah, it just seems like a like similar to Gerald's Game. It just seems like a bad idea. It just seems like why would you want to do this, actually?
Yeah.
How can you do it in a way that gives justice to it and still manages to tell your own story and the things that you care about? I don't know, man. It's like, we definitely want us to keep this in mind as we go through it, that once again, Flanagan is like being a filmmaker on hard mode by picking the most difficult things.
Right. Yeah. Because I don't know that we called this book unadaptable. Certainly it's been adapted multiple times now, but there's a lot about it that feels unadaptable, where it's just like this weird, like you read the whole book and you're like, I'm not really sure what happened.
Yeah.
There's no way you can, well, there's not no way, but it's very hard to make a film designed to do that and have people like it, right?
Yeah.
Because you can make a movie where people are like, that was weird, but normally they're not like, that was weird. They're just like, I don't know what, that was a waste of time. But
yeah, especially in an episodic 10 episode format, right? Like it's one thing to make a 90-minute movie where you're like, whoa, that was weird. It's another thing to make 10 hours of film that captures that. And you almost like, it is really fascinating. Like Mike Flanagan has become so well known as being a showrunner. Like he's definitely a writer and director. He directs films. It is where he started and what he continues to do. He has a new movie coming out here in just a couple months. But like the thing that got him on the map for most people, myself included, is his work as a television showrunner. And that's definitely something I want to focus on over these next 10 weeks, is this idea of like, why did Mike Flanagan want to make TV? Because TV and movies are different. Like even in this world of prestige TV that we live in, where sometimes television shows are just 8-hour movies or 10-hour movies, like it is still different. It operates differently. It has different rules. There are different expectations. There are all these different things. And he just kind of jumped into it. Like he had never had experience writing a long form episodic story like this. And I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it works, in my opinion, is a testament to all his skills. So I'm really looking forward to breaking that down with you. I'm really looking forward to kind of discovering. I have never watched this show with the book as fresh in my mind as it is right now. That was the reason why we organized the show this way. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's gonna be a very fun ride.
Me too. I'm super, super looking forward to it.
Yeah. Just as a little programming note for people in case they want to know, there are, I believe, 2 episodes out of these 10 that have director's cut versions of them. I believe those director's cut versions are only available on the physical disc that Mike Flanagan somehow convinced Netflix to do for the show, which I own and I know you do not. Matt will not be watching the director's cut version because he doesn't have the disc. He doesn't have access to it. You'll just be watching the Netflix version, but I will. And so something I will bring to the episodes that there is a director's cut version is what is the cut? What did it change?
Cool.
It's just a little, I think we got an email about that the other day and I thought I would just address that here on the show.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah. There's also director's commentaries for 2 of the 10 episodes. I will definitely be listening to those as well. And I'll try to bring the insights from those as well. I think Flanagan's director's commentaries are some of my favorite. So I'm looking forward to that. I've never listened to them for this show though. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. I'm can't wait.
All right. Well, with that, is there anything else you wanted to say about Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House?
No. I feel like we got our arms partially around it. Feel like
as much as you possibly could, right?
Yeah. As much as we can reasonably expect. Yeah.
As much as you can hold on to a ghost, we've done that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap everything up with our discussion question. This question comes from our second episode covering Hill House. I think when we were in the cusp of Eleanor's seeming dive into the pool of insanity. What question did we ask, Matt?
We asked, what is your favorite depiction of insanity? And then, tell us why.
Yeah.
So Apocalypse Win 7 says, my favorite depiction of insanity is in the criminally underrated Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which Stephen King names as one of the scariest movies he has ever seen. The movie follows Jessica, who was recently released from a mental institution and is now in the care of her husband, Desmond. Hoping that a change of pace will help her heal, they set off on a road trip to a newly purchased farmhouse in the countryside. But beneath everyone's hopeful intentions lies an unspoken fear. What if Jessica relapses? What if the hallucinations return? Two scenes especially stand out. In one, Jessica is having soup with her friends when she suddenly thinks, "It's blood, Jessica." She looks down and sees a grotesque swirl of blood and an eyeball in her bowl. Her face tightens as she fights to maintain composure, trying to suppress the terror from what she knows must be a hallucination. No one else reacts, so she keeps quiet. In another, Jessica spots a pale blonde girl standing motionless on a distant hill. She stares, frozen in horror, unsure if the figure is real or imagined. She doesn't say a word until her husband calmly says, "Don't worry, I see her too." The wave of relief that washes over Jessica is mirrored by the viewer. Finally, for once, her perception is validated. Or is it? That uncertainty of not being able to trust your own senses saturates the film. Even by the end, it's unclear what was real and what was the product of Jessica's fractured mind.
I've never seen this movie, but I really want to, like right now.
Yeah, right. It's one of those premises where as soon as I read this answer, which I read earlier, I was like, I started imagining like, well, what is going on? Maybe there's something like maybe they're trying to manipulate her into thinking she's crazy.
Yeah,
I have no idea though. That sounds great.
Yeah. All right, next we have Kame 1919, who says the game Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is about a Celtic warrior who is on a quest in Viking territory to save her lover's soul. Believing she is cursed with voices she hears, she leaves her village to find a way to break the curse, which leads to her village being wiped out. While Senua believes she is cursed, she is actually suffering from psychosis. The game deals with the condition directly, so much that the developers worked with a neuroscientist and psychosis expert at the University of Cambridge and patients who suffer from it to portray it as accurately as possible. On her journey, Senua suffers from hallucinations, dizzying and blurring lights, and voices that encourage her, lie to her, warn her, and berate her as she struggles towards her goal. Senua's journey to hell is fraught with dangers, many of which come from her own mind. Honorable mention to Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly, and a great movie. It's about drug addiction and how one can slowly lose their mind as drugs destroy the mind and its neurological pathways. Without giving much away, the protagonist becomes more and more unreliable as the addiction grows and begins to lose sense of time and self. The author does this in an interesting way, and the further the book goes through it, it becomes harder to follow the protagonist's line of thought, even though thinking in lines of foreign languages, he has even thinking in lines of foreign languages, he has no recollection of knowing. I've actually never read A Scanner Darkly, the novel. I've of course seen the film.
Yeah.
And I have played Hellblade, and I enjoyed that game quite a bit.
I haven't played Hellblade, and I haven't read the book, but I have seen the movie, and I distinctly remember the movie succeeding at making you feel like you're losing your mind, because there's parts in the movie where you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like baffled, and then later it actually does make sense what's going on, but I just remember being so confused in a good way. Love that movie.
It's a great movie by Matt's favorite director of all time.
Oh no, who directed A Scanner Darkly? J.J. Abrams?
Richard Linklater.
Oh, Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
God.
Matt does not like Linklater for some irrationally stupid reason that we will never fully understand.
I think it became a meme, but that doesn't mean it's also not true.
I think literally the only thing that's true is you just didn't care for Boyhood, and that's it.
That's what it was. I didn't care. Well, I didn't care for Boyhood, but I didn't care for it on a level where I was like, the person who thinks that this is a good message is bad.
It's all coming back to me now. I don't want to fight with you.
I wonder if I would agree with that essay now, though. I should go back and read it. I probably completely changed as a person since then.
Yeah, I mean, anyway. I think you had children, but you were still very early in parenthood.
Yeah.
When you saw that movie,
actually, it may be the case that the film doesn't even disagree with me. It was just upsetting to see it portrayed, which would be embarrassing if true. But that is the kind of mistake that I might have made like 8 years ago.
All right, deconstructing Linklater. Let's go.
I know that I got to find that essay now. Anyway, okay. Strong Comfort 5625 says, my favorite depiction of insanity is Randall Thor from The Wheel of Time. In the universe of The Wheel of Time, male users of the One Power, as the magic in the universe is called, are hunted and cut off from the source of the magic because the power is tainted and causes madness, inevitably leading to death on a massive scale if left alone. Enter Rand, who is the prophesied savior, destined to fight Shaitan and save/destroy the world. the catch is that he cannot have the magic taken from him, and he is the strongest channeler alive. As the story progresses through the 14 books, he progressively slips further down the path of insanity to the point that he creates and learns from a past life his soul has lived, having complete conversations with him and struggling multiple times to keep his past self from taking him over. Not a great description, but the trip is fantastic. I thought that was a pretty decent description, actually, for the Wheel of Time, given that it's the most sprawling and enormous and convoluted thing ever.
Matt, did you write this answer? Is this you?
Not this time, Scott. No. No, but it's funny that I feel, I don't know who's watching the Wheel of Time TV show, where I just finished season 3
Literally
of that.
Just you, I think.
It's just me and my brother, actually. But I do feel like we're just starting to get into the leading edge of this stuff here, and it's delightful. I'm actually quite enjoying, like, the actor does seem to have understood exactly what is expected of him, to be Rand in all of the dimensions that are required of this character. Anyway, I agree. I think the whole Rand's madness subplot is one of the more sort of keeping you glued to the page elements of the Wheel of Time.
Great. I'm glad you got your Wheel of Time answer in here, Matt.
Yeah.
Next, we have Para Jane, who says, Hannibal Lecter is my favorite insane, because he's not actually insane at all. He's locked up in an institution for the criminally insane simply because he needs to be separated from other humans. He understands right from wrong. He just chooses grotesquely wrong at times. He can control his impulse to kill, but he chooses not to, because he believes he's beyond anything as pedantic as good and evil. He's perfectly capable of functioning in society so long as he doesn't run across someone he deems unworthy of life or who gets in his way.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's a pretty good Hannibal Lecter description there.
Yeah, I think Hannibal Lecter is really fascinating as a character, right? Because you want to understand, like, is it possible to be almost like so rational that you become a monster? Of course, I think I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if there's like a right answer to this, but I think you have to be insane to have the complete lack of empathy required to murder and eat someone. But perhaps it's just like, well, that's what I say because I'm a small-minded little person and I'm not as smart as Hannibal Lecter. I don't know.
I love that line of thought. That he is a person that is able to separate right from wrong, but yeah, how do we define insanity?
Mm-hmm.
Is insanity being able to do that, or is it being able to do it but consistently making the wrong choice?
Right.
Or it's the insane choice. Yeah.
It's easy for you to not cannibalize people because you feel natural human empathy, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
next.
Not.
I was hoping you'd catch
the
way I said that.
So wait. This is a 6 step back.
Next question.
Have you not eaten a human being?
I have not yet. Aqua Longfish says, I'm partial to the quiet insane, the kind of characters who appear normal to start but reveal their insanity over time. Sometimes it's a gradual shift. Sometimes they suddenly swerve into full-blown nutcases. I think my favorite overall is a man who was driven to insanity by a number of factors. His position of power as the head of a secretive company beset on all sides by competitors, his role as the authority to a group of strange people whose culture and mannerisms were so different from his own, and his isolation, holed up away from the world and losing all touch with regular people. I'm, of course, referring to Willy Wonka, specifically Gene Wilder's version. I mean, come on, only an insane person would come up with that boat speech.
Totally.
Great answer, Aqua Longfish. Enjoy that. And agree. Poor William Wonka.
Poor William Wonka?
Poor. Yeah. He's a victim of his own success.
Interesting.
Yeah. And those kids had it coming.
I mean, that is definitely true.
Yeah.
All of those kids had it coming.
Yeah. They were the worst. We did that thing again where we couldn't get to everybody's answer, of course, but I'm going to rapidly go through and just mention kind of the honorable mentions from everybody whose answer we didn't get to. This first one pains me. Jiraxis Eridar Lord mentions the Necrons from Warhammer 40k. Great answer.
This is how you know Matt doesn't fully choose all the answers, because he absolutely would have chosen that one.
Yeah, I would have in a heartbeat chosen that one. Steve Living Room says, I never promised you a rose garden by Joanne Greenberg. Duran Longbeard says Primal Fear, the film with Edward Norton and Richard Gere. I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't watched it in forever, but I think that's like the movie where everyone became aware of Ed Norton. Hobo Demon talks about Stephen Sondheim's Assassins, a musical. I'm not familiar with this at all, unfortunately.
Nope.
OK Row 2424 says the narrator of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. Am familiar with that. That's a great answer. Kind of reminds me of Eleanor in some ways. Damien to me 1111 says James Cromwell's character in 6 Feet Under. You seen that? I don't know that.
I've seen a little bit of 6 Feet Under. I have not seen the whole series.
Okay. Michael Turn the Key says Aaron Paul's character in The Path. And I read this answer. There's like a specific scene that they reference where there's like a sort of a artistic camera movement that really illustrates this descent into madness that they thought was really compelling, which sounds cool, but I haven't seen it. And then finally, Bent Westward says Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. Yes, absolutely.
Those are great. Loved it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We forgot to pick a discussion question for next episode before we started recording, so I'm going to do it live. Here we go.
All right.
Who is your favorite character in The Haunting of Hill House, and why?
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah. I hope that not everyone just picks Eleanor, because, I mean, that's the most obvious answer.
Yeah.
But maybe it should be
Arthur.
Arthur, yeah.
Mr. Dudley.
I was gonna say Mr. Dudley. I mean, the correct answer is Mrs. Dudley.
Yeah.
Everyone. So I hope you all make a wise choice there.
Yeah.
But yeah, who's your favorite Hill House character? We'll be reading that episode or answer on episode 2 of the show. So we will have firmly moved beyond the book at that point. But that's okay. We can take a look back and talk about our favorite characters in this novel. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that is going to do it for us this week. And that is going to do it for Shirley Jackson's A Haunting of Hill House. Next week, as we already mentioned, Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House begins with episode 1, which Matt is titled Stephen Sees a Ghost. That's interesting because there's no one named Stephen in the book we just read. So already we're kind of going places.
Yeah, we're well outside the lines. That's exciting though. All right. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, on Twitter at flanagan'swake19, and Blue Sky at flanagan'swakepod, and the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is the best place to answer that discussion question. Also, don't forget that all these episodes, every single episode of Flanagan's Wake is available on YouTube. So please leave us a comment and click the like button and subscribe.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I also was told that you can upload video podcasts to Spotify now. Ooh. So I'm going to be looking into doing that as well. So if you are a Spotify user and really want to see the videos, maybe that will become an option for you as well. I'm still looking into it. So no promises quite yet.
Cool.
All right. The one thing we have to talk about, though, is merch. It's merch, Matt.
Is there merch?
There's merch. doofmedia.myshopify.com. I believe since we have met last, we have added some fun Hill House related merchandise. A shirt that says "Not Sane" on it, which I find funny and delightful. And I believe there's another shirt that has the opening. I wanted to call it crawl, but it's not. The opening paragraph of The Haunting of Hill House from Shirley Jackson is on a shirt with a creepy looking house on it. That stuff's pretty cool. I've ordered one myself, or actually, hold on. It's in my cart. I haven't pressed the button yet. I'll do that right away. But I think that merch looks really cool, and we also have other Flanagan's Wake merch, and we appreciate. We kind of put the call out a couple weeks ago for some additional merch ideas, some specific inside joke mug ideas, and we got a few, and we're moving forward on some of them. We're gonna have some stuff to announce pretty soon, I think, on some new fun merch, but keep checking. Make sure you keep checking doofmedia.myshopify, doofmedia.myshopify.com. That's where you can get hats and shirts and mugs and all that great stuff.
That's right. And if you want to support us in other ways other than merch, then you can do that by heading over to patreon.com/doofmedia. There's a bunch of cool stuff over there. Me and Scott recorded another episode of our podcast going through the TV show From just last night, and that should already be out by the time you're listening to this.
Yep,
so
they'll definitely have it. Yep.
So go check that out. Hope everybody enjoys it.
Of course, if you cannot support us in a financial way right now, there are other great ways to support us. You can share the podcast. This is it. We're here. The Haunting of Hill House is 1 week away, and there's a lot of people that I think will enjoy listening to two guys really dissect this show. So if you think you know some of those people, send the podcast their way. Maybe they'll like it. You can, of course, continue to leave us rating and reviews on all the podcasting platforms. This week's Spotlight review comes from 57 Sancho Bar, Grill, and Bakery, which I'm sure is very delicious, but I don't know where that is. But if you ever see it, they gave us 5 stars, so they're awesome. You should go eat there. They say, I've been a fan since Kingslingers, and I also love to browse through Doof looking for things to watch so I can listen to Scott and Matt talk about it. This new podcast is like an old friend that has the best of both worlds with books and a TV movie mixture. Thank you so much for taking the time to continue giving us something to listen to. Long days and pleasant nights. Well, thank you so much, 57 Sancho Bar, Grill, and Bakery. Your muffins are delicious.
Yes, I love those muffins.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to leave those rating and reviews. They honestly, folks, they really do help. We really do appreciate them. Please keep them coming. Keep them coming on Audible if you listen there, on Spotify if you listen there, on Apple Podcasts, of course, if you listen there. And if there's some other app that also does the rating and reviews that I don't know about, do them there too.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, folks. Next week. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House begins. Episode 1. Let's do it. I'm going to go watch it right now.
All right. Me too.
We'll see you next week.